The Live the Dream Media Network is proud to host an Arizona legend. His remarkable journey spans college and pro basketball, business excellence, and community leadership at the highest level. Get ready for insightful conversations, expert analysis, and a unique perspective that only one man can deliver. This is the Bob Elliott Show, exclusively on the Live the Dream Media Network.
Welcome to the Bob Elliott Show. And as you know from the past, what we try to do is we try to educate and have fun regarding various Tucson, Southern Arizona, state of Arizona, and national events. We will not be about politics or religion, but we will emphasize leaders in our community who do different things to support our community, what they do, why they do it, and how they do it. There are a lot of organizations in our town, great organizations, that provide services for our community. We're going to hear about what this guest does, that maybe you can help them with some donations. That is who we are. That is what we do on a weekly basis. My guest today is Lynn Davis. She's the project director of the Tucson Jewish Museum and Holocaust Center. Lynn, welcome to, as I call it, the bird's nest, to go for my college nickname of being Big Bird. Welcome.
Good morning, Bob. I'm really pleased to be here.
I'm glad to have you here. So what we try to do also is so people get a chance to know about you. And the goal is that when the show is over, I want the viewers to say, oh, I know more about her at the end of the show than I did at the beginning.
Excellent.
So let's pretend we got the DVD. Let's roll it back. Where were you born? And just take us through your life so people know about who Lynn Davis is.
All the way back, huh?
Yes.
All right. Born in Santa Monica, California, St. John's Hospital, which I think is still standing there.
Okay.
But raised really primarily in Sonoma County, Northern California.
Mm-hmm.
And my folks are still there in the same house I grew up in. All of that. It was a really wonderful place.
Is your room still there?
No, it's now a TV room.
Okay.
Yeah,
All right.
yeah. They switched that over a while back. But yeah, went to UC Santa Barbara.
Mm-hmm.
Before that, I was an exchange student to France as a senior in high school. But then, came back, went to college in California, and yeah.
I would love to hear about your exchange student experience. I mean, that one sounds like there has to be a lot to that story.
There's a lot to that story. And that story, that 1 year made such a difference in, who I am today, who I grew up to be, how I think about the world and people and experiences, all that stuff. I was 17. It was my, senior year of high school.
Mm-hmm.
And I was in two families over the course of the year. So I had one host family for the summer, a few weeks over the summer, and another family during in Paris during the school year. But that first piece, I lived with a family who had a restaurant in the Beaujolais.
Ooh.
They lived right above.
Ooh.
And it spoiled me for life. It ruined me, absolutely. And their little corner of the earth is just, it became such an important place for me. I brought my parents back years
Mm-hmm.
later. I brought my husband back years
Mm-hmm.
later. They've met my kid.
Yes.
They've just remained so special. But I think that sort of experience, and I'm not going to pretend that 17-year-olds today are anything like I was a few years ago as a 17-year-old. But if you think about being across the world with no cell phone, no internet, no computer.
Yes.
I called home, I think maybe once a week using my parents' calling card.
Right.
You were just, it was, you were really on your own, essentially, and speaking a different language and doing schoolwork in a different language. And I think really, both figuring out what coping skills you had and what coping skills you needed to develop,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
Building resilience.
Yes.
And I think also a really profound appreciation and understanding for how different things can be in different cultures. And even going from one Western culture to another Western culture, things are different.
Well, you said the first family had a restaurant. My wife always accuses me of being a foodie. So
nothing wrong with that. You tell her
no,
there's nothing wrong with that.
Exactly. But what was your favorite dish there at that restaurant?
They used to make a really amazing, this is going to sound crazy to people who've never had it, a chicken liver salad.
chicken liver
So
salad. So what's in there?
sautéed, like poached sautéed chicken livers that are done in like a red wine reduction, and then frizzy lettuce and a really sharp vinaigrette, and there's nothing like it.
You know, I have to laugh when you talk about French. I've got a granddaughter that's in love with croissants. I mean, I don't care where she is, where breakfast, and she wants a croissant. No English muffins, nothing like that. So I know that she would love to go back and see that restaurant. She said the first family had a restaurant.
First
What about
family?
the second family?
Second family was really interesting. We were a house. I ended up with a woman who had been widowed, and she had a son who had left, who was an exchange student also, who had gone to the States that same year. So I lived with her adult daughter, and her niece lived with us during the week, coming in and out of Paris for work. So we were a household of women,
Right.
which was very interesting. I had a lot of independence. Had Paris at my feet as a 17-year-old, and it was pretty special.
Amazing. So
Pretty
you
special.
do that experience at 17, you come back, you go to Cal Santa Barbara.
Yeah.
Anything special about Cal Santa Barbara?
I had a great tan. I had a great tan.
Not really a priority for me. I wouldn't be worrying about having a great tan.
You know, I mean,
At school.
trying to get your schoolwork done with the beach so close really is a challenge.
That
for
would be
young
a
adult.
challenge. Although
Yeah.
I will say, I can still remember, coming from Ann Arbor, Michigan,
Yeah.
and you see what kind of weather there is right now in the Midwest. And it was freaky where my first game in college, I actually went there with a tank top and shorts and flip-flops over to McHale Center. I'm like,
Yeah.
something's not right here.
Yeah.
But
it's a whole
it's
a whole different. I find that the longer I live here, the thinner my blood gets. You
Oh.
know, like
I have no patience for cold weather
no,
anymore.
no,
Not
no.
at all. Not at all.
Santa Barbara. So I did. Came out of there with degrees in French Lit and political science.
Okay.
And thought I would be a diplomat or something. But
Right.
that things take a turn.
Things take a
hasn't
turn.
necessarily turned out that way, but really grateful to have a second language under my belt.
Yes.
That's come in handy any number of times.
So you get out of Cal Santa Barbara, you start your professional life. What different roles did you have there?
It's been a history of, it took a while to figure it out. Did a lot, taught Montessori preschool, ended up in nonprofit spaces doing early education, working with people who were doing early childhood ed. That set a course for nonprofit work in a bunch of different spaces. But looking back, I think the themes are fine arts management,
Right.
or visual arts management, and nonprofit admin, and the mashup of those two has led to some really interesting things. I ran Sonoran Glass School for a number of years, so a nonprofit arts education facility that was really a lot of fun. Was at Tucson JCC for quite a while. Also in an arts and culture space. So
Yes.
ran the film festival and the art gallery and the sculpture garden. And I think through all of that, I've been able to, manifest my belief in how important arts are
Yes.
for a community, how they build community, how they help, articulate what's important to a community, how they can elevate the voices of artists. I think all of that is just so, such a vital piece.
What brought you to Tucson?
College boyfriend.
say, and the truth now.
Like
'cause
so many women.
What did the parents say?
The parents said, I thought I was going to be here for 2 years.
Okay.
I thought I was going to be here for 2 years. If you had told me 30 some years ago,
Right.
that I would call Tucson home, I would have called you a liar. But here we are.
That, Lynn, that is so true that a lot of times we're trying to get people to move to Tucson. And face it, the pay scale economically in Tucson is not what it's like everywhere else.
And the cost of living isn't what it used to be.
Yes.
Yeah.
But people say, oh, no, I'm not going to take a pay cut, whatever. But quality of life, so many of us that have come to Tucson,
Yeah.
and you're like, you know what? I like living here.
Yeah.
And even though the pay isn't as much as I receive someplace else, I seem to be able to do more with it, and I feel better.
Looking at friends who've stayed in California, for the last 30 plus years, I've seen how difficult that is. Commute, cost, all that stuff.
Yes.
I do think we have a quality of life here that we wouldn't have someplace else.
True.
And I think we have a quality of friendships here that is, that is unsurpassed. You might, the kid's out of the house now, the kid's on his own. We talk about, over the years, we've talked about where else we would go. But we'd leave a lot.
Yes. Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. So you've had talk about some of the previous positions that you had leading up to your current position.
So I look at, like we said earlier, like looking forward, you could never have mapped this out, but looking backwards, it all makes sense. And so I think, I've had a couple jobs. I've spent most of the last 20 years in and out of the Jewish community here in Tucson. That started with a project at the U of A that no longer exists. It was called the DNA Shoah Project. That was an effort to reunite Holocaust survivors and their immediate descendants via a global genetic database.
Yes.
And I think it was a little ahead of its time, science-wise,
Right.
but it was a brilliant idea. And that's where I first met Holocaust survivors.
Right.
Right? I think many people don't realize that Holocaust survivors are still among us.
Right.
And
Yes,
if you ever have the opportunity, that population is dwindling, as you can only imagine. We lost a dear member of our community just last week. But Tucson has had such a remarkably robust and generous community of Holocaust survivors over the years. So we have identified 270 plus folks who settled here post-war, not all at once, but over the years.
Wow.
And
that number seems large, but it is what it is.
It is what it is. It does seem large. And whether it took, again, most people landed, on the East Coast and made their way out west, the way a lot of people do, and got stuck in Tucson the way a lot of people do. We just mentioned that. But, for whatever reason, that community, or for several reasons, that community has been so generous with their time, and they have been just absolutely formative educators in our community, given time to school groups, given time to civic groups, given time to members of the armed forces.
Yes.
To tell their stories and how important, really pushing a lesson of tolerance and, never again, right? Like hoping that people learn those lessons. And that's why that's why our Holocaust Education Center came about, plus or minus 10 years ago, is because this group of survivors in our community had been pushing for it for years.
When you talk about giving, and so when we thought about the idea of starting the African American Museum of Southern Arizona, one of the first places we went was over to the Tucson Jewish Holocaust Museum. Yeah. And Michelle Blumenthal was the executive director at the time. Blumenberg, was the executive director at that time. And they gave us two great tidbits to think about before you start the museum. And the first was, do not have a gift shop. And people you got to have a gift shop. What they educated us on is the fact that the paperwork, the administrative time, for the amount of money that comes in from sales, it's not worth it. Okay?
As an accountant, I'm sure you can appreciate that.
When they said it, bottom line would not work, I said, okay, put that one in the pile number two. The second one was, don't accept any books.
As gifts, as donations?
Yes. And Michelle took us up.
Can confirm.
Oh, yeah. She took us up to the second floor of your museum. There was a room, wall to wall, books. And, Michelle said, really recommend that you maybe strike up a relationship with the Pima County
Friends of the Library.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Have people donate the books there. If you see a book that you really want to use or utilize in the museum, digitize it.
Yeah.
But a lot of times, first of all, books are bulky, they're big, they take up a lot of space.
I have moved a lot of books in the last 3 years. Yeah.
But that kind of transitions us to what you do now. Okay, so what your role now?
So my role now is I'm doing something very special. We have something at the museum called the Rabbi Joseph H. Gumbiner Community Action Project, and it's a mouthful, but it's important because it speaks to a really intrinsic piece of legacy and tradition rooted right in our building.
Right.
for folks who haven't been to Tucson Jewish Museum and Holocaust Center, we're located at 564 South Stone. We're just south of downtown.
Yes.
And we are in the museum space is what was the oldest synagogue in the Arizona territories.
Right.
So it was built in 1910.
Wow.
During the early 40s, early to mid 40s, when it was the original home of Temple Emmanuel, which then moved to Country Club and is now known as Kol Ami. They merged with Or Hadash a couple of years ago. But when it was still a congregational space in the mid 40s, we had a very activist, very progressive rabbi by the name of Joe Gumbiner, Rabbi Joe, who was really he worked very closely with Prince Chapel AME that is still next door, a black church that's still next door. He was on the Tucson, I'm not going to get the name right, I don't think it was Tucson Civil Rights Commission, but it was the group that first worked to desegregate Tucson schools and put that process in motion. And he worked, his other thing was when black servicemen were coming back from the war and weren't able to buy houses, he really worked to fight housing discrimination.
Yes.
His first post out of seminary was in Selma.
Okay.
And so he was really steeped in a civil rights tradition and coming at that from, a position of Jewish, from a platform of Jewish values. And so when we were talking about how we want to show up in community and, what we want people to know about us and what we want to be able to do in relationship and coalition and all these things, we're like, we have this thing right here, right? Why not celebrate all the work that Rabbi Joe did? And so that's what we're doing. And so that is our interfaith, intergroup social action work.
I know the museum and your museum have worked together with Dr. Jason Jerkovich at the University of Arizona, who did this project looking at redlining.
Mapping racist covenants.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. And a lot of people.
Yeah, that's when I first met Beverly.
Exactly.
Actually, I think,
And a lot of people are not aware of the fact that there were and there still are a lot of HOAs in this town that have in their CC&Rs language that says that certain people cannot live in this neighborhood, whether they're Black, Latino, Asian, Jewish,
Native American.
Yes.
And that's actually, I learned so much being on that advisory committee. That was really a fascinating project. And for folks who aren't aware, Mapping Racist Covenants is available online. So what Jason and his team did, is record and digitize. You couldn't go to one place, like Pima County Recorder's Office, and search to see what language was in any given CC&R. And so his team has put that all up, and it's searchable online, and it's available. And it's called the Mapping Racist Covenants Project. So our museum it's not really a collections-based space. We say it's a narrative-based space. So we tell a lot of stories. And one of the permanent exhibits is called Anti-Semitism and Exclusion. And a few years ago, we interviewed folks, from across the community, different identities, different ages, different backgrounds, and gave them an opportunity to talk about, ways that they had experienced discrimination in their lives. And so Deja Fox is on there as a high school student. We talked to a queer professor at the U of A. We talked to one of the first women to go through Rogers College of Law, all this stuff. And Stanley Feldman, who was, I believe, Arizona Supreme Court Justice, but he talks about how when his family first moved into their neighborhood, which I think is Miramonte or El Encanto, and I think it was El Encanto, and so for folks who aren't familiar, very nice neighborhood in central Tucson, and how the neighbors said, well, we're okay with Jews moving in. This is probably in the 30s. He was a young boy. But please just don't put your name on the mailbox.
Right.
Yeah.
We definitely.
And what I love about that exhibit is I think it puts anti-Semitism in context with other identity-based discrimination. It gives us a place to talk about if we have a group of school kids 30, 40 school kids, and maybe there's only one or, no Jews in the group, what does anti-Semitism mean to them? How do we frame it people, in something that they might be more familiar with, right? If it's anti-Hispanic discrimination, if it's anti-LGBTQ discrimination, everyone's experienced bullying, exclusion of some sort, unfortunately. But how does that make us think a little differently about other people's experiences?
Well, I know from Doc's studies and research, there are still some HOAs with the language in there with the CCNRs, and you know, supposedly, like I said, well, it's not being enforced. I know that Beverly's been working very hard to make sure that you do not erase the language in the CCNRs.
Absolutely.
You draw a line through it. You date what day it was. You know, you're doing this. It is part of our history.
You make sure people know it was there.
It is part of our history. You know, whatever's going on, it is part of our history.
Yeah, no, that project was really meaningful. I mean, it did impact legislation at the state level. And there are, you know, neighborhoods who are now taking the steps to, you know, to change that language in their own documents. And like you say, like it hasn't been enforceable for years, right? We have the Fair Housing Act, we have the Civil Rights Act, like all these things. It's not enforceable. But one of the things that was so meaningful to me, I think even when Jason launched the project, he talks about his own experience, and his husband is Black, and they were, you know, doing the closing documents on their own home and saw this language. And he talked about the notion of dignitary harm, which I had never heard of. Right. And you think about like these things that just assail your existential being, right? Like you've gone through all this work to choose a house, save for a house, you know, starting a life here, and there it is in black and white that your neighbors don't want you there.
Right. Oh, no. It happened to Beverly and I in our first house.
It still makes my skin crawl.
Yeah. You know, we come back as 1978. We buy a place. We're in there. A week later, we get a phone call. There's a problem. And I'm like, what's the problem? The CCNRs do not allow Blacks to live in this neighborhood. And we're like, so what's the problem? We're here. We've been here for a week. Well, we'll fix it. I said, I think you will. You need to. That original research was done by the University of Michigan in Ann Arbor, where my wife and I are from, about the neighborhood just to the south of our elementary school that we went to. And we always could see where, you know, we all had to go out of school and we would take a right and head down that street, and the white kids would come out, take a left, and go over to that neighborhood. And it just, you don't understand as a kid what's really going on. You find out later on that something's going on here that's maybe past our pay grade. But no, it's a good story, and I'm glad that Jason put that project together. Yeah. So now, your museum, you guys have a fundraiser coming up.
We do.
Yes.
We have our annual Purim Ball.
Yes.
Purim is a Jewish festival. Happens in the spring. It's early this year. It's the same time as always as the Jewish calendar, but they don't always line up. So end of February 28th, we will be having our Purim Prom. We've given it a different theme every year. And so this promises to be a lot of fun. We're encouraging people to come in their prom attire. They get to pick a decade. So I hope to see some pale blue tuxedos in the mix. But
that could be interesting.
Yeah.
That could be interesting.
Yeah. And the reason we're doing the reason it's a Purim Ball is because back, you know, our building was built in 1910. So a few years before that, the Hebrew Ladies Benevolent Society decided that Jews in Tucson, you know, who had already started gathering to celebrate you know, Shabbat and religious services, etc., needed a building of their own. Right. And so they started raising the money. And one of the things they did was they had a Purim Ball. Oh. So about 3 years ago, we reinvigorated that idea. And we had our first event downtown. We were out at Trail Dust Town last year, so the Western theme was a lot of fun. And this year we're going to be at the Dunbar Pavilion, and so we're having our prom, you know, on a gym floor, which should be great.
That's good.
Yeah.
Well, Lynn, I'm glad that you had a chance to come here, and hopefully now our audience knows a little bit more about Lynn. They know about the fundraiser coming up. And thank you for being on the show.
My pleasure. So glad to be here. Thank you so much.
We'll be here next Friday again at 9 a.m. With another show. So everybody stay safe, stay warm, and if you're traveling, definitely be safe.